Welcome to another episode of Riskey Concepts RC. Today I'm going to be assembling the bumpers with the steering relocation for the, well, now these will fit on the Mad Force, the Twin Force, the Mad Force Kruiser, Mad Force Kruiser 2.0, and they should fit on the Fox as well since they all have the same axles. The only things not provided in this kit that you will need are these two tools, which are pretty basic, a little piece of masking tape, and obviously the servo that's already on your truck. So this didn't come off a truck, it's just a random servo I'm going to use for the video for the assembly. So first foremost, put the two sides, we'll put the bumper itself together. Grab the two sides and the two bars. Easiest way to do this. Put the two screws in. Now, ignore my nasty burn. I was detailing a motorcycle here. The owner of the machine shop wanted to sell his bike, so he asked me if I'd give it a bath one day while I was out there helping him. And when the customer came to look at it here a couple days after that, I barely, and I mean I don't even know if I really touched it, but I got so close to the exhaust that it melted my skin. So that's that beautiful. Anyway, back to the job at hand. So now you don't want these tight because you're going to want to be able to adjust them when we put the plate on. So you just want them on. Now you want, when you put these through, as far as if you mix all the screws up, you want about 6 millimeters of thread sticking out. The reason 6 millimeters is it's an M3 screw, and based on typical strengths, the threads in steel, now I know these are aluminum, but the threads in steel, if you're threading steel screws into a steel part, the screw threads any deeper than twice the thickness of the screw are overkill, because the threads will strip out, or well, the screw will break before the threads will strip. So either way, you're kind of screwed. Now if you notice here, now look, this is what happens when you put it on backwards. You won't be able to put it together, so you'll end up having to take it back apart. That's what happens when I get sidetracked and thinking about my burn on my hand. Now the reason that these are slightly off kilter like that is because the axle, they put the diff for whatever reason slightly off kilter. I assume it has to do with the transmission. For the nitro, wanting to put the nitro engine on one side and the trans ends up being kicked to the other. So I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it wouldn't hurt anything if they would just put universals in there and put it in the center. So bumpers assembled, set that aside for a second. Take the plate. Now this is when you're going to want those two pieces of masking tape. So put the screws in, just a tiny piece of masking tape to hold the screw so it doesn't fall right back out. Same thing on this side. Hey now, cooperate. That's weird. There we go. A little piece of tape. Now remember, you don't want them in the way of these because that's where the bars are going to be. That's the reason you have to do this, is because if you don't put these in first, you won't be able to mount them to these. So, because you won't be able to get them in once you mount this, because it'll be in, the plate will be in the way, or the bars will. So now this is oriented in one of two ways, so you can mount it either way. I mount it this way for the setup I'm showing. And the purpose of the setup I'm showing, you can set up the servo this way or this way, your preference. I'm going to set it up for this way. The reason I don't do it this way is because I don't want it hanging down below the bumper and be the thing that road debris catches and rips on my servo. So I'd rather it hit the bumper and this sits up. Now I put it this way so that the wires can be quickly tucked in along the chassis instead of just sitting out here floating in the front looking all unattractive. So we get to this. You get the other four. Now these, the shortest ones were what you use there. There were only 2 of them, so it should have been kind of obvious. Take the other 4. Again, thread locker on everything. Get your plate here. Now remember, this is the top, here is the top. So I want that up towards the top. And again, not tightening them, just getting them all started. Once I get all of them started, then I'll tighten them up, and then I can tighten up the side plates too. Reason being is there's only a little bit of jiggle room to get the parts to align, so if you've got it slightly out of alignment, you will not be able to get all the screws in. You'll have to take it back apart. So it's just easier to do it this way. I've caused enough personal headaches by getting anxious and overkill. Okay, so we're that far. Again, tape, see what I mean about you didn't want it to be in a way that you couldn't get it back off. And you couldn't get at the screws because the bar's in the way. Well, you can still use them, but you can't get them in and out. So now we come to the servo mounts, and these are the same thing. You've got a little bit of adjustment depending upon what you're working with and which angle you want to do. I try to make these so that you get a little bit of fine-tune adjustment. Now, obviously, if this is up and I do it this way, it's going to bring it up the most compared to bringing it up this way. I'll bring out this other truck. Let's see, I got the room. And I'll show you, I've got one assembled. So I've got one truck assembled here. I'm spinning around to the front. This is kind of where we're going to, finished product. You'll see what I mean. Now, I didn't try to get it perfectly. I wanted it kind of centered because I didn't want to dictate to everybody what they have to do. That's kind of what's going on here. Is I want to leave a little bit of room for your own interpretation of things and let you do with it how you want to do it. So that's where we're going. And you can see now in this particular I use versus for the tall. So I made it go up as much as possible. Get this out of the way. Go back to the job at hand. So this is the top, and I want maximum height, so that's going to go that way. Now I can tear the tape off, and you see why I suggested making it long. Same thing over here. And once it's on there, it can't really fall out. The screw, once the bumper plates are mounted, I suppose here I can spin this around. I'll show you. So you can see kind of the difference in height if you mount it one way versus the other. And now you see why it has to be done in order, because if you're doing it this way, if you mounted these before, now you couldn't mount the plate. So it's all in a specific order. And again, don't tighten these up until you tighten your servo. You want it snug but not tight, so you can still adjust. A little bit of wiggle room. So next you would mount your servo. I like using the rubber pads, especially the ones that come stock with the Mad Force. Don't have to. This is that hardware. Push that aside. Take the servo saver out. So here we have the parts that are included with the servo saver. It's basically, this is made by Tamiya. This is kind of a universal, if you will. You've got one for Futaba and High Tech, and also for the others for the Sanwa and the KO and Acombs and so on and so forth. So you're just going to use this, and whichever one of these works for your servo. The Futaba servo is what's going to match the stock Kyosho servo. Then you get 3 spring rings, or it's spring steel basically, and 3 screws. The brown one is the only one of the screws that you're going to use unless you've got other servos. This is for a plastic servo. The metal are the fine threads are for a Metal Gear servo. The black one is a smaller thread. Let's see, I'll take them all out. I think it's like a 2.5 millimeter. So you've got a black one, a brown one, and a silver one. So what you're going to do is, these 2 springs are the same size. You're going to put those on first, and then this. I'll go ahead and show that. But first, the servo saver that I was initially going to use was this one, which you can see is basically the same thing. This is more or less a knockoff of the Tamiya. However, I think the springs might be just a little bit stronger than the Tamiyas, and that's why I intended to use these. So if you'd like, as you can see, they're not very expensive. You can pick up one of these and you should be able to either replace the black spring that comes with the Tamiya, and there's not that many of these available. That's why I wasn't able to buy them. So I mean, there might be 10 available on eBay if you're lucky. So if you're thinking you want to do this, you want to beef up your servo saver, go ahead and quickly pick one up. Or at the what I was thinking is more or less wrap the one around the other. So since you're going to wrap these 2 one on top of the other, and since that's a possibility and these are both the same size, why not do it with that and make it even stronger? So you'd end up with 4 springs instead of 3. Your other option, if you really prefer, is to go with the Kimbrough, but the way that the servo horn mounts and the way that I like to mount the link on top, as you see, that's one on top and one below. If the servo horn height isn't tall enough to clear, that screw's going to be hitting the servo and limiting your amount of steering travel. That's why I've gone with this, is because it clears. So we'll go ahead and I'll show you how to assemble one real quick. Okay, onto the servo saver. So put that away out of sight. So first, this is the Futaba High Tech one. First you put on one of the small ones, followed by stretching out the same size spring over the top of itself. Ouch. There we go. Followed by the black one, which is the larger one. Okay. Get my finger out. Yeah, that didn't hurt, but it's a little pinch. This goes on next. And then this is the cap. So with the servo facing like that, this would go up like that. So what we'll do next is we would want to attach these, but since the servo's like that, the long one goes on this side and the short one goes on this side. Now it's up to you. 3 Racing makes an identical version of this. I think the springs are a little bit stronger. There wasn't very much as far as inventory available, so I wasn't able to buy enough of them to sell them with the bumpers. so I had to go with these. Again, it's basically the same thing. This is the Tamiya version. What's different about the 3 Racing, this is the 3 Racing plate, this is the Tamiya plate. You can see it's the same darn thing with a little bit of difference. So like that's the same horn. That horn is unneeded. The horn that's gone is the one I'm using. The one of these that's gone is the one I'm using, and then the cap. So it's basically the same thing. But like I said, what's different is the Tamiya version. These holes are a little bit closer together, so you cannot put both of these on top or both of these on bottom. So you have to put one on top and one on the bottom. It's your preference, your choice, which one you want on the top or the bottom. So what you would do is just simply, that should be this hardware over here. I want the 2 shorter ones. 2 longer ones are to mount these to the steering knuckles, and then 2 lock nuts. So this through here, and a lock nut. It's just the cap. No need to worry about it for now. This through here, and a lock nut. Now, ideally you would do this on the servo, because right now you'd have to slide it through like this to put it on. But it doesn't matter. Not like that was all that hard. Okay, so now you got that bump. You know, obviously you would have mounted these to the bumper, or to the servo to the bumper, and then you tighten those up, and now you'd be ready to mount this to the axle. So what you would need to do first, so all those screws would have been used, and all you'd have left are these and 2 other screws. 2 other screws are to mount, actually it would have been the 2 longer ones. There we go. So you have 6 screws and 4 lock nuts. Now, what those are for, these 2 screws go here to mount to the knuckles, and these 4 screws go here to mount to the axles. Before you mount any of this, however, you have to do one thing to the truck. When the truck comes from the factory, the steering is on the other side. So, underneath there, right underneath there is a screw. Same thing on the underside. In fact, I can flip this over and show you the ones on the underside. So that's kind of what you're looking at. There's your finished. You see the screw I'm talking about. So you're going to take that screw out and the same one on the other side. And then you're going to spin this whole tube. The knuckle will spin with it. You spin the whole tube so that this knuckle steering mark goes from being over here to being over here. The reason you have to do this is you got to get this out of the way. You can't have this in the way of your steering. So you do that on both sides. Put the screws back in, and then you can mount the bumper. Now, as you can see, the bumper mounts to the little ears that are on the suspension arms. These are the aluminum reinforcement bars that I do to make it so that these don't bow. Kind of get the main gist of things. As you can see, this wraps right around the axle, and it's for the most part pretty tight up to the axle. So there's not a lot of slop in there, so if you do encounter a front end collision, some of the load is going to be taken by this, some of the load is going to be taken by the screw. Some of the load is going to be taken by this. Some of the load is going to be taken by the screw, and some of the load is going to be taken by this ear. But the vast majority of the load is going to get transferred into where that ear mounts to this plastic arm. That's the most likely place to break. However, if you drove into something and say it was the size of my finger and it hit right here, all the impact goes to right there, just that one little spot. Whereas this, it travels down both sides, and all of that ends up taking some quantity of load. Now, even if this takes 5% of the load away and you still have to transfer 95%, well, 47.5 goes to this side and 47.5 goes to this side instead of 100% to this one little impact point. So to a small degree, you could say this will reduce your likelihood of destroying the bumper, but at the same time it now sticks out a little further. It's a bigger thing to grab stuff, so I mean it could be argued either way. So same thing done in the rear. Now in the rear I did not match it to the side because I wanted to run the wires. I'll flip this over. I'll get more in depth on this truck when it's done. The wiring, I haven't finished running it yet. What I want to do is I want it nice and sleek. I'm going to put it behind here and right down along the battery tray, along the top of the frame rail, and then zip tie it here and bring it up into the battery box. If I put the servo the other way to match the axle, it would have come up this way. I'd have wire on this side and a wire on this side because the speed control has a wire as well. So this way I can put them both together and just have a little cleaner look. Now the same thing for the front. So you can see here's the piece of tape. I just took it off and set it down lower. What I plan to do is the front will come in through that little hole that's intended for a start switch. I'll put the tape back on to cover up the rest. Then I'll put some shrink wrap. Well, before that I'll put some shrink wrap over it, and then I can kind of tuck this in a shape kind of like that and make it disappear a little bit so it's not so, you know, just random wire looking all unattractive like so. So if you take it and kind of tuck it up here, make it follow some of the stuff, it'll at least hide it away a little bit better. But that's what you get. Now if you're using like in this case a Spectrum, you have the ability to click the left or click the third channel, which in this case is the rear steer, to so for the four-wheel steer, instead of rambling on about trying to explain it, I figured it's just easier to show you. So here's the Spectrum DX4S, and all you've got to do to control the rear, since the rear, now this is on the factory settings, you'll click this way and it'll steer the wheels one way. You'll click it up, it'll steer it back. You click it up again and it steers it back the other way. So you've got, if you will, now I might have it switched, but basically, you know, either or, left or right, center, left or right, whichever you set it up for. And then I'm pretty sure that in the long list of programming, there is the ability to switch it. Now I haven't read the whole manual, so I can't guarantee this yet, but to switch it so that the third channel operates the same as the first channel, so you have four-wheel steer. So that's kind of the intent of the layout here, with the ability to crab walk, the ability to have two-wheel steer, and the ability to have four-wheel steer, all with some button clicks on a transmitter. Now that screw that you see is not a provided screw. That's the provided screw that comes with the servo saver. So if you got any questions or any comments, feel free to post them below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and for those that have already bought the kit, thanks for your purchase. Got any problems or any comments or anything that you'd like for me to maybe address for future? Like I mean, I'm human, and I may have missed something. Give me a message, let me know. Thanks again for watching. Have a good day.